Future Sense is a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia at bayfm.org. Hosted by Nick Jeans and well-known international futurist Steve McDonald, Future Sense provides a fresh, deep analysis of global trends and emergent technologies. How can we identify the layers of growth, personally, socially, and globally? What are the signs missed, the truths being denied? Science, history, politics, psychology, ancient civilizations, alien contact, the new psychedelic revolution, cryptocurrency and other disruptive and distributed technologies, and much more. This is Future Sense.
Yeah, you're tuned to Future Sense, here with Nick, Steve, and our special guest, Ross Hill, this morning.
That's right, and we're talking about words today and the problem that we face with fake news and not knowing who to believe or what to believe. And how do we find a way through that? And what we're working towards in our discussion today is the fact that looking at actions and outcomes really is a more reliable way of knowing where people are coming from, what they're intending or what they're capable of. And we've got to this place in a very graceful way through a natural evolutionary process of various dynamics, including this big pendulum swing that we get as we evolve through various layers of consciousness in the long term. I'm talking about the whole of humanity here. We swing from individual focus to a communal focus and back to an individual focus again. Each time we go to one of those particular sides of the pendulum swing, there's a different theme that plays itself out, but with the underlying individual or communal focus. And we're swinging away from the individual focus of the scientific industrial era right now, and we're in the transition phase towards a new communal focus, which will be centered around the theme of deep human connection and very, very much associated with group acceptance, being liked. And you can see those sorts of themes are already playing out on platforms like Facebook. And also we know from looking at history and the length of these different paradigms, these eras, that they are slowly, in fact actually now they're quickly getting shorter and shorter and shorter. The earliest human paradigms like our hunter-gatherer phase, our original tribal phase, were quite long, many tens of thousands or even a couple of 100,000 years in the case of hunter-gatherer. And we're slowly reducing the time spent in those paradigms. So the scientific industrial 300 odd years, and now this next paradigm, the postmodern relativistic, Graves called it looks like it's only going to be a couple of decades. And we can already see, because what we know from his wonderful research and what we're seeing playing out in the world at the moment, we can already see why it's likely to be fairly short-lived. And its purpose in the big scheme of things seems to be to act as a final cap on the first tier of consciousness. So we've grown through all of these up until this sixth layer, through hunter-gatherer, tribal existence, egocentric, warlike, agricultural, authoritarian, scientific, industrial, and now to this relativistic, network-centric, which is emerging and which may only last for a couple of decades. And it's causing us to reconnect a bunch of dots. So in the last individual era, the scientific industrial, we kind of pulled everything apart so we could look at it,
Reductionist.
And
specialization.
Rather than sort of picking the flower and smelling it and appreciating it, and we're actually not picking it.
Not picking the flower.
Just smelling it.
Just witnessing them.
Yeah,
Consider the lilies I'm quoting the Bible again today. Consider the lilies of the field. They toil not nor labour, or something to that effect. They're just, there they are.
Thank you. But of course, in the scientific industrial,
punish me later.
We picked the flower and pulled it apart, put it under the microscope so we could look at those little bits and just figure it out. And then it died, of course, in the process. But what wonderful things we discovered.
Yeah.
We discovered about all those tiny things that we wouldn't have found otherwise unless we put it under the microscope. So you can see the value in it. But now we've got to compensate as the pendulum's swinging back in the other direction, and we have to learn to put things back together again. It's kind of like Humpty Dumpty, really.
To use your analogy, it's great. We've taken taken the flower apart and understood the flower on a level we didn't understand before, but we didn't understand it enough. We're only just beginning to, I guess, understand it within the context of the environment in which it grows.
That's right.
And all the connectivity of all things on this planet that it is related to.
Yeah. And it's kind of like we got distracted, to go deep into knowledge within a very narrow scope, and how fascinating it has been and how useful also.
Yeah, it solved a lot of problems, which is its purpose.
Yeah, exactly. But then we kind of stood back and go, oh, that was good, but then the flower's dead. And we look around and see that we pulled all this stuff apart and we've got to figure out how to put it back together again. So it really is a lot about rejoining the dots, about learning how to rejoin the dots, and even at the simplest level, like within community, rebuilding our communities, which have been also pulled apart by that scientific industrial process.
Pulled apart, but also made bigger.
Yeah.
Our communities now, we have planes that we can fly around the world on.
That's
we can go faster and further than we could before.
Yep.
So where our community, possibly used to be our local town or our local region, now we're sort of stretching it until our community is pieces of the whole world put together. And I can just as easily find out, what happened in Paris this morning as what happened in Byron this morning.
That's very true. I think this is something that we lose when we are too narrowly focused, and even in the emerging sixth layer, just focusing on the things that went wrong or seem to have been pulled apart by the previous layer. We can get lost in terms of maintaining that biggest picture where the overall progress is absolutely amazingly net progress in terms of the widening of our scope, the deepening of our knowledge, the growth of our general understanding of the big picture.
And it's so much more complex. There's so many options.
Exactly.
But also what you're saying too, it's important to acknowledge enough, like we're all pretty aware of the problems that we now have on the planet, and that's this is all facilitated. This connectivity that Ross is talking about has enabled us to know, as you said, what's going on everywhere all the time if we want to, and to therefore see all the problems and also the things that are sprouting up as solutions, either technological or otherwise, to various issues that we have. So we're seeing all those things better and quicker and faster because we have to, don't we? Because we're in a stage where we actually have to come up with solutions that are beyond what we're currently even moving into right now.
Yeah. Exactly, and we are in a sense propelled by our problems, and we have been all throughout history. It's the problems that we create from one particular focus, whether it be individual or communal themed. They are what cause us to want to gravitate back in the other direction in order to find the solutions to the problems we created. But
yes.
we're getting to a point now where we can actually start to see and talk about these large-scale dynamics, and we can understand that, we can understand that we can ask the question, do we need to create these problems in order to continue this journey, or can we actually see the bigger picture and see that, we went in that direction, the next step is to go back in the other direction. Do we have to actually create problems to push us that way, or can we consciously choose to go?
So this is a very big change, isn't it? This is a very big change, which is what Graves identified and called momentous leap.
Yes.
To jump into that frame. It is a very big one.
It is, and this is the kind of change that we'll see when we move beyond the sixth layer across this momentous leap into actually being able to see all of the patterns that we've been getting pushed around by, and then of course once we understand the patterns, we can work in flow with the patterns, and it really changes the ballgame a lot. In the short term, though, we are, most of us on the planet, who are not aware of these patterns. And don't have the perspective to sit back and look at them in the way that I just described, we're going to continue to create the problems. And so it's worth having a discussion about that and how these emerging social dynamics of the strong need for deep connection and acceptance are actually where we can anticipate the problems that we're going to create. Basically, out of those dynamics, the problems that are going to be generated, and therefore we do have an opportunity to some point mitigate the damage, the turbulence that we have to navigate.
And it was very interesting because in the immediate term, it often feels like just chaos and anxiety, and there's so much stuff, and it feels very overwhelming. And what do I do with it all? And it's an interesting time because we've got some of these different layers all active at the same time, And in the past, it was often the old way versus the new way.
Yeah.
And now we've got the old way and the other way and this way
That's
and
right.
that way. And
Yeah.
what are they doing over there?
Of course. And at this time on the planet, we've got more value systems, more layers of consciousness active than ever before.
And I guess part of that, with what you're saying, what I'm hearing here is what is required now as we move even further forward is the ability to identify in different frames, in different layers, in different paradigms where certain solutions may exist. Because it's not about transcending everything and just leaving everything behind. It's actually about finding ways to include what works at different layers of consciousness and bring that into a new system of systems.
That's right. So by being able to stand back and see that there are these layers, and each of the layers has a particular way of problem solving which is suited for a particular level of complexity of problems, then eventually they become a tool set which we can access and apply, as is best for the common good. Whereas at the moment, most people are locked into one dominant mindset associated with a layer of consciousness, which has one way of problem solving. And it's like I said in the first part of the show, it's, if it doesn't work, it's get a bigger hammer, right? And all you've got is a hammer.
Hit it again.
Whereas we eventually, on the other side of this momentous leap in consciousness, we'll be able to say, okay, the hammer's not working. Maybe we need a screwdriver.
Yeah.
Right?
Even though you might not agree with the screwdriver, you might have liked the screwdriver, you might have had a judgment about the screwdriver, but actually the screwdriver is
once you've seen it in action, it does
the proper
screws
tool,
really well.
proper tool for the job.
Exactly. Nice sort of segue back to our central theme of the show is that the action speaks louder than words. Yeah. So if it actually works, we ought to take notice and just acknowledge that it actually works. And also at this time when we're being flooded with fake news and lots of uncertain forecasts and predictions for the future, which, by definition, we can't test a prediction until it has the time to play itself out. So that is somewhat difficult.
But and it's very easy to get stuck in a loop with these things as well.
It is. Absolutely.
I was just searching for a piece during the break on how search engines have been blocking some of the leading acupuncturist practitioners in the search results.
Yes.
And so I was I heard about this news from my Chinese doctor, and she was saying it's a bit of a concern within the alternative medicine space, because the search engines have started blocking some of these categories because they're alternative medicine. They're not widely accepted by the mainstream by definition. And so as the search engines are starting to filter things that are fake news and erroneous and not backed by evidence, they're actually filtering a lot of alternatives. Even though most people and the Australian government would say that acupuncture is a accepted
part of
treatment,
part of medical health.
Yeah, so I was trying to find this article on the internet just to check what I was talking about, and then I realised I was searching Google, and so it's not going to appear for me. Whoops.
And that's an example of how this layer 6 tendency to want to come up with an agreed standard, an agreed belief, an agreed response is leaking into their filtering system on that search engine, where they're flattening everything out. So there's anything that doesn't agree just doesn't show up. Famously,
though, we love Google in many ways because it is so simple, and they flatten it. It's just one text box. You type in what you want, you push search, and it's meant to come up. But there's all these layers of filtering. So there's the autocomplete part where it says, did you mean this word after that word?
That's right.
There's the maps blacklist. If you look at Google Maps or Apple Maps in different countries, the maps are different.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Crimean region from Russia, it's part of Russia.
Yeah, yes,
if you look
exactly.
at it from the US, it's not part of Russia.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of these different distinctions that often when we're using an app, because we're using an app that looks the same as everyone else's app, we think we're getting the same information from inside it. But mapping is one of those great ones. You cross a border and suddenly the whole map and the whole border changes and moves by often quite a significant amount.
Very interesting.
Very interesting.
Your point about simplicity made me think of an Einstein quote where he said, "Things should be as simple as possible, but no simpler."
I love that. That's very good. We've got a lot of texts here. I'm going to zip through them as appropriate. Not everything, not all of them, but just bits here that you've been commenting. Reframing is the neuro-linguistic term. Yeah, we're talking about reframing here. That's true. Someone else has written, it's interesting to note that it takes catastrophes to bring people together. So universally and karmically, it will get worse here before it gets better to bring all consciousness together as one. Someone else has written, graceful way, evolution, yes, into the future, but certainly first tier evolvement has been largely brutal. That's an interesting comment.
It has, absolutely. You know, it's been full of violence. There's no doubt about that, and violent rejection of people who believe different things, have different values.
Someone else has also written your experience, Steve, that you're talking about. I was speaking online with a close friend of more than 30 years. When I explained my differing view to her on climate change, she said she felt she could no longer associate with me.
There you go, and that's that driver, the new driver in this layer 6 value set, where social acceptance, being part of an accepted part of the group, becomes the most important thing. You know, even to the point of severing a friendship, a long-term friendship like that, and of course the fear associated with that driver is the fear of being rejected by your group, and you know that is, it's like. Isolation, you know, being the harshest form of punishment for a prisoner. I mean, look what they've done to Assange.
Yes, Julian Assange.
Near killed him. You know, and it's a fear of that, and this desire to want to remain part of the group, an accepted member of the group.
Yeah, but it's very interesting. What will we do, and what will we sacrifice in ourselves to be part of the group and continue being part of the group?
Exactly.
And I think it is very interesting because when you do look at the actions that people take, there's some people who go really hard on the actions, and so I was just having a look at where Greta is today, because she, famously she'd sailed across to the US. She went to an event at the UN in New York, and then she was going to make her way south over land
to Chile,
to a UN conference in Chile,
right.
which they had to cancel and move across the world to Madrid
because of civil unrest, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
Chile is one of the many countries in the world with that much civil unrest going on. That's part of this equation that we're talking about, in fact.
And so for most of the participants in the conference, it was fine. They just changed their flight. They go across to Madrid. But Greta said she's not going to take any flights, and so she had to find a sailboat to get all the way across the world.
That's right, and she's almost there, you were saying.
So she's done day 18 of her trip with a couple of Aussies that she's riding with, and they're arriving in Lisbon tomorrow morning. Good on her for sticking by her words and not just jumping on the nearest private jet across to the next location.
She's still got to get from Lisbon to Madrid. That's a bit of it's Portugal to Spain. It's a bit of a journey there.
She's making good progress.
Hitching probably would be good. A couple of other quick texts. There's a lot here. People, thanks for writing, and we can't cover everything here. Talking about the illegitimacy of the government in this country with respect to First Nations people. That's an issue. That's another issue too. Great topic of conversation, guys. Someone else has written in. That's our friend George. Hello, George, down there. And yes, I will play that track for you in a second. That's true. And there's a bunch of other stuff here. Thanks for all your texts. Keep them coming in, and all your comments, and keep those minds working out there for sure. We'll take a break here on Bay FM.
For all of you out there, strangers in a strange land, you're grokking Future Sense here on Bay FM.
10:28 here on Future Sense with Nick Jean, Steve McDonald, and our special guest Ross Hill. I just want to give a bit more flesh to the piece, the text that came in regarding the First Nations people, because you say here, I'm pretty sure this is the truth. The Westminster system of Parliament is null and void, as there was no treaty signed and no bill of sale with the First Nations peoples 250 years ago. That's true. So technically, the government in this country is an act. ACT in Canberra. That's kind of funny. It's an act. Words that don't really mean anything, I guess you could say. And thanks for your text, 0437341119, if you've got anything else to say. Thanks to this one too. Thanks to Dudley. He's written, congratulations, guys. The way your show is going, I believe it is becoming one of the most important radio shows on air. Well, do you mean everywhere or just on Bay FM?
In this part of the galaxy, I think it means.
Strike our egos. Go on. we don't mind. No, thanks, Dudley. Thanks for listening, and to all of our regular listeners,
Fantastic. And, you could kind of think of Claire Graves' work as a bit of an operating manual for the human experience. I certainly think of it that way. And it's the more you sort of delve into it, as I have done, the more amazing revelations you come across. And one of the things it does do, and again, this is all from data collected during field research. This is not Claire Graves' imaginings that he's written down. It's all from hard data which he has analysed with the help of a small network of people and then documented. And he's basically documented the potential pitfalls of each of the different perspectives that come from each layer of consciousness. And so what we might do for the rest of the show is just have a look at the probable pitfalls that we will face from this emerging paradigm. So this relativistic, humanistic, network-centric way of being human that's rapidly emerging across the planet at the moment and is generating all of this unrest, dissatisfaction with the old ways. All of the, really, I think it's fair to say all of the unrest that we're seeing around the world at the moment is driven by dissatisfaction with life conditions, which have emerged from living a different way.
And also very much on our theme, a lot of words that are spoken by governments of all colours and designs across the world, and very little action taken to actually to fulfil the needs of the people one way or the other, whether it be social justice issues, access to jobs, housing, clean water, and climate issues, environmental issues generally speaking on the planet.
Yeah, certainly that's been a characteristic of the layer 5 way of governing because of the drive for individual success. Those people who are successful tend to end up with most of everything, and those other people who aren't successful miss out. Exactly. So some of the pitfalls that Graves pointed out are this drive for human connection and acceptance by your peer group. And it's important to point out that the peer group for layer 6 will be spoken about, and this is a difference between words and actions here, it will be spoken about as if it is everybody. Okay, you hear people who are operating through layer 6 speak about doing things for the good of all humanity, and the words portray the idea that they are considering all of humanity when they make all of their declarations. But if you watch the actions show that there is severe rejection and pushback against people who don't think in a layer 6 way. And that's what's driving a lot of the protests around the world right at the moment. So there you have this contrast between what's being spoken and what's being acted out, and hence the theme of today's show is suggesting that you actually look at the things people are doing, their actions, to get a truer sense of what they really mean. So whereas people might say, we love everybody in the world, everybody has the right to say whatever they want to say, do whatever they want to do, be free, yet you look at the actions, and the actions are censoring people who don't say things that layer 6 agrees with.
Yes.
Just as one example.
Yes. Yeah.
So the actions are speaking louder than the words there. And there is a danger when you operate from a place where you have to, as a group, as a social group, agree on what's correct, what's right, what's proper, and then apply fairly rigid rule sets around that. There is a danger that your commonly agreed understanding might be incomplete. It might only be partially correct.
So would you say this is a fault of consensus thinking, essentially, isn't it, this kind of idea?
Extreme consensus.
Extreme consensus.
Yeah. And, with everything, when you have a balance, then you make allowances for, things that maybe not
some sort of
in consensus agreement. But when you get to an extreme pendulum swing, then you see the sorts of things that we're starting to see in small amounts, where you just get blatant censorship and disallowance of anything that's not, the party line. And this happens in any any we, us, our themed layer. So if you go back to the agricultural era, which gave rise to religions, most of our major religions, it gave rise to old school communism. And you can see in those belief systems how anything that wasn't per the book, it wasn't on the list of what to do, was actually branded as completely wrong, disallowed, you were punished if you did it, those sorts of things. And this is what happens in conformist systems here.
It's interesting, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the difference between Scott Morrison and Malcolm Turnbull right now, where Turnbull's come out and said, the Morrison government's, failing, particularly around climate change, but other issues too. Whether he's right or wrong or whatever, that's irrelevant, but just that difference between the conformity that Morrison is kind of perpetrating upon the Australian people of this is the way it is, there's nothing to look here, it's all good, we're all together. We're our community, the quiet Australians,
Quiet Australians, yes.
that whole notion. All these sort of things are perpetrating this idea that we're all together actually, but it's a different sort of together under Morrison than the green layer that we're talking about,
That's
and
right.
different from Turnbull, which is expressing more of the orange layer.
It's a different dynamic. It's political spin. It's essentially, in some respects, a lie that you're telling people in order to try and get them to conform, whereas the conformity that's coming out of layer 6, which is a genuine conforming system, is a genuinely believed conformism. It's people are conforming because they genuinely all believe that this is right, and part of the motivation to believe that the group think is right is this desire to want to be accepted by the group, right? Because there's a subconscious understanding that if you don't agree with what the group agrees with, you're going to be cast out of the group.
Outside, yeah.
Exactly.
Outside the tent.
And that's a very scary thing.
Yeah. I had an interesting experience of that in the recent climate protests. So I was in Melbourne, where there was about 100,000 people, which was huge. And there was a lot of really, really good signs. I think the internet's been really helpful for protests because people have been able to practice memes. And so the handwritten signs that people have now are pretty fantastic. But with 100,000 people, there's obviously a lot of different subcultures within there and sub-beliefs as well.
Yeah.
And so I was there primarily, I would say, because I think we should learn more about the environment, get more in touch with the environment again, probably chop down less flowers here and there.
Yep.
But then I saw the group of vegans and I thought, oh, do I have to be a vegan to fit into this march? And I thought, well, that might be a step too far at the moment. I'm not sure if I believe in that piece of it, but it is part of the broader climate discussion. Is it okay if some people, drove their oil-driven cars here? I actually caught a tram, which is electric powered, but then the trams often get taken out in these protests because people sit in front of them. But they're actually all powered by renewables.
Yeah.
And so there's all these really interesting paradoxes once you peek beneath the veil of climate protesting into all of these sub-beliefs and different sacrifices I could make to fit into all of the various groups.
Yeah, and that's a good insight into the fact that the value system itself is a little bit like an iceberg. There's a whole bunch of stuff under the water that you can't see, and then you're just seeing a little bit poking up above. And if we go back to the previous communal layer at layer 4, which was the agricultural era authoritarianism, it gave rise to a whole bunch of different religions, right? And each one of those religions was shaped by this conformist nature of the value system. And in particular, that theme of there's only one right way to do anything. But that one right way could have been Christian, it could have been Muslim, it could have been Jewish. And it's a similar kind of thing happening. What you're seeing is there's an underlying dynamic in this layer 6 value system which is causing people to want to come together within a group to be accepted by the group and to conform with whatever the group believes. But that group could be veganism, it could be a climate group, it could be anything that conforms with the general themes of this particular layer. And it'll play out in different ways, and then of course you get confusion and even conflict between those subgroups in the same way that you got Christians versus Muslims at war.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with left or right politics when you're talking on this layer, this level.
And the multi-generational as well.
Yeah.
There was one young boy that was walking past, and he asked his father, "Dad, why are we here?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Because we have to be."
Yeah, right.
That was it.
Yeah.
A lot of confusion.
Yeah, a lot of
Kept
confusion.
on marching.
Yep.
It's interesting as you're speaking because on this layer that we're talking about, 6, that's emerging in Claire W. Grace's configuration, we're seeing this, as you're saying, this pulse towards conformity, but now it's on a global level, which is the first time. That's the big difference here, and in that sense, it speeds everything up. As we're talking about, this layer probably won't last that long. The connectivity is such that things move very quickly in this space.
Yes.
But we are sort of arguably practicing this conformity on a sort of, so to speak, lower level in order to get ourselves ready for actually our true global perspective and solutions that are truly global.
The final solution.
I didn't say that. I did not use the word final.
true.
That's your word.
It's always tempting to think that there's an end point where, yes, we've done it.
Well, we have seen.
Oh, no, well, I certainly didn't mean that there's an end point, but just to get to the next stage, because it's easy to think that this new emerging paradigm is the solution. And I think a lot of people out there do think that.
That's right.
The green way of doing things, sustainable, renewable, all these sort of things, they're all good ideas. They're much better than what's happened before, arguably, for sure. But to say that this is the end point is problematic straight away.
Of course. And history shows us that each time there's been a paradigm shift, we've thought that we've found all of the answers that we've needed, and that's been true for a short while. But then living life the different way produces new problems that you can only solve by going to the next layer of consciousness.
More complex
so
problems.
And this is why Claire Graves called his book The Never-Ending Quest.
And a good example of that is what's happening in Western Australia at the moment. So many Australians have got solar panels on their roof, and the solar panels are great, and they feed in this solar energy into the grid. But the grid was designed for huge, power plants fueled by coal or whatever else, not these little tiny generators on everyone's roof. And so I think a lot of people were surprised at the percentage of houses that have solar on the roof now, because
really
Australia is one of the leaders per
Yeah.
capita for that.
Yeah.
And now that it's here, we've got these issues with the grid having to accept all of this, because the panels don't talk to the grid doesn't talk to anyone else, and so it can't say, hang on, we need a little bit less energy right now.
That's right.
We can't accept all of it.
And they're filling the grid up, and they need to shut down the coal-fired power station potentially if they get too much power in the grid, and coal-fired power stations aren't designed to be shut down.
You can't shut them down and start them up real quick. No, that's a big failing.
So it's a huge issue. I mean, it's a failure of strategic planning, and one that's resulted from the fact that the people who've been building these solar panels and installing them, and people who've been wanting them on their homes are operating from a different value set than the government. And the government doesn't see the motivation. The government doesn't see the likelihood that this is going to take off like wildfire and overtake the coal-fired power stations.
The scale is impressive.
They haven't planned for it. It is impressive, and
really
I think it surprised everybody. But people not long ago were saying that Australia was quite backward when it comes to renewables, but here we are all of a sudden, we've just shot up.
Overwhelming amount.
But as you're saying, in the structure of it has been part of the old paradigm. In other words, Perth, as the city we're talking about here, it's all one grid with a whole bunch of solar panels. That's great, but they're not actually what we need is a resilient local community and exchange ability between small communities and suburbs and so forth, and this kind of structure, which is beginning to be talked about. And there are organisations and companies who are doing this, but it's still fairly early days.
That's right, because the potential issue here is that with too much solar power being generated, it could mess up the entire grid for everybody, basically, by blowing the fuse on the whole grid, I guess.
But there are some interesting solutions coming. There's one Perth company called Power Ledger who have got a blockchain-based solution, and it's still very, very, very early days. But they're effectively setting up this infrastructure so that each supply of power, each panel, can talk to all the other suppliers in the area and trade the excess power, or turn it up, turn it down, and that's really, it's similar to adding what we think of as the internet to a lot of these other parts of the world that aren't connected to the internet. So you don't flick the light in your room and turn the light on and think, oh, this is not connected to the internet, but it's not. And so the other light bulbs in the world can't react to what you're doing with your light bulb. And in Australia, we get this every summer with everyone's turning on their air conditioners. It drains a huge amount of power. And if it does get to the capacity, then it creates the wide scale problems. But there's a lot of people working on different solutions so that we can have these local decentralized networks that can respond to each other for the first time.
So I guess what we're saying here is that these movements are wonderful, yet they're not strategically thought out in depth, and they haven't been. And this is the problem with the era that we're emerging from, is there hasn't been enough strategic thinking in so many different ways, and that we're coming to start to see this, I think, more and more.
And also the fact that the new thinking, the new consciousness is coming from a grassroots level, and it hasn't yet filtered up to our government systems and our social systems, and that is potentially, I think, the biggest challenge that we're facing over the next decade or so, is trying to cope with the collapse of systems that cannot manage this new way of being human, and building up the new higher level systems, as in social and government systems, quick enough to take over.
You're tuned to Future Sense with Nick Jeans and Steve McDonald. Engage, emerge, activate. and spiral up.
10:50 here on Future Sense. Thanks for joining us today. A few minutes left.
Yeah, in this last few minutes, I just want to dive into some of the probable pitfalls that are going to emerge from layer 6 thinking and this particular way of being human. And we've been talking about this driver for group acceptance, sociocentric behaviour, and the fact that if something is or runs counter to what is generally agreed by the group, then it may be rejected, may be censored, people may be persecuted as a result of that. And there is tremendous danger in that from a sort of a large-scale perspective in particular, and that is that the scientific method which is developed during the previous paradigm has been based on the continual improvement of knowledge, always being open to improving our understanding, and that is what has really got us to where we are now, is this fact that we can say, okay, this is what we know so far, this is how we think it works, and then every now and again someone else will discover something new and say, actually, this needs to be added to that to give us a more complete understanding, and that sort of process has got us to the moon and back and allowed us to send machines actually out to the very limits and beyond the limits of our solar system, which is fairly impressive. But so with this growing conformist theme coming from layer 6, we are seeing censorship, we're seeing rejection of anything that's different, and particularly a lot of it has been driven by fear, and I think climate change has probably been the most prominent subject in terms of people being fearful, the creation of anxiety, and particularly in young kids, and this fear that what if this is correct and what if we don't act in time, then we could all die or something like that. But what's not being said is what if we act without understanding and actually make things worse. And when there are some early signs of that potentially happening with things like Bill Gates wanting to fund some scientists to put up a giant thing to block out the sun. I mean, what could go wrong there? Really.
It'd be a great show anyway.
The scary thing is, though, that these are serious discussions. This is real money.
With people with real money,
people are thinking of doing
can actually do these things.
So this is what concerns me. So this rigidity in rejecting other opinions, other possibilities, makes us blind to new thinking. So right now, I think it's fair to say we really don't have the solutions to solve most of the major problems that we're facing globally, and one of the solutions we need is a deeper understanding of human nature, to understand why people don't want to solve the problems and their behaviour, their motivations are taking them in other directions. And the only way that we're going to discover those new ways of thinking is to be open-minded and not to latch onto one theme, one concept, one idea and reject everything else. So that is a major, major danger, and it's one of the things that is going to create the evolutionary tension for our momentous leap to second tier, because there will come a time where we run off on a tangent, as we're starting to do already, thinking that, okay, we know everything, we don't need to know what you're saying because we already know the truth and it's right, and then sooner or later we're going to get hit in the face with the truth at a species level, and people are going to say, holy shit, and one of the things that I can see coming is the complete collapse of confidence in science. I mean, we're already seeing now, we're in the process of a collapse of confidence in government, right? And somewhere down the track, we're going to have a major, major global collapse in the confidence of science itself, which is going to be a big, big slap in the face. And it's this kind of extreme tension that is going to actually blow our minds out of first tier and into second tier. So the ultimate outcome is good, but the question is how much turbulence, how much human suffering needs to happen in the process, for that to actually occur. And our new ways of thinking are only going to come from a minority of people who are thinking differently. So the danger of pushing that minority away, shutting them down, censoring things ought to be fairly obvious, but we're competing with this tremendous growing desire to want to be within a homogenous group, to be accepted by that group and to feel good about being part of the group. And that's the dynamic that's competing against this at the moment. And ultimately, it's all perfect. Ultimately, evolution will play itself out, and there will be a swing back. The pendulum always swings back in the other direction. There's no risk of that. I guess the tempting thing for us at the moment is, with the benefit of stuff like Claire Graves' work, with the benefit of being able to stand back and see these dynamics, we have the opportunity to change it.
Yeah.
And so rather than be blindly pushed along by the pendulum swing as we have been in the past, we have the opportunity to actually take some real action that might reduce the human suffering required for the changes to take place, as an example. And the temptation of doing that is pretty strong.
Someone's written in, Dudley, and he's written in, why people don't want to find solutions. Most deep truth to explore. Well said. I think you said that, why people don't want to find solutions in some cases, in some layers of consciousness.
Yeah, it comes back to the driver of your particular dominant value system.
And how smoothly it's working at the moment. If your life is going well and smooth, then what do you need a solution for?
That's exactly right.
When you're in the middle of chaos, you could do with a few solutions.
Yeah, too right, too true.
Too true.
So I guess the punchline of the show is at this time in history, with what's going on, all of the dynamics surrounding us, we're going to find more value in looking at the actions of people than we will out of just listening to the words they say, because we will notice then that their actions don't always match their words.
Thanks for joining us here today. FutureSense.it is our website for access to the podcast, also the Apple Podcast app, and you can also go to our Twitter page at Future Sense Show. Thanks to my co-host Steve McDonald.
Thank you.
And to our special guest Ross Hill this morning. Thanks for joining us again. It's lovely to have you here as always, and thanks to all of you out there who've been listening and for your many, many comments. Great pleasure to have you with us and to enjoy this conversation as we continue to find the best path forward for this planet this time. Much love to you.
You've been listening to Future Sense, a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia, at bayfm.org. Future Sense is available on iTunes and SoundCloud. The future is here now. It's just not evenly distributed.